Hello amazing people, my name is Lesego and I welcome you to yet another episode of the Insightful Daily. This one is going to be the most interesting episode that you've ever come across for the Insightful Daily. My dear friends, in today's episode, I need you to make sure that you invite your friends, you invite your family members, you invite your co-workers, you invite your classmates, you invite your professors, you invite everyone that you know and invite them to come and enjoy the insights, the most amazing wisdom that you'll never come across from anywhere else except here on the Insightful Daily. Like I said, my name is Lesego, the visionary of all times, and in today's episode, my amazing friends, we are going to talk about the most interesting subject matter, which is tax evasion and tax avoidance. As you know that in the previous episode 9, we talked about taxes, the introduction of taxes in Botswana, how taxes came about, and how we started to have a proper tax structure and tax legislation in Botswana. I told you, my dear friends, in the previous episode that I'll continue to teach you more about this subject of tax. I promised you, my dear friends, that from now on, I'm going to be taking you through tax in different forms. In today's episode, we're just going to be focusing on tax evasion and tax avoidance, because very often people do not really have as much information about tax. They don't understand why paying tax is very important. Hence why in today's episode we are going to be focusing on tax evasion and tax avoidance. I know that right now some of you, my dear friends, who are not really familiar with these concepts of tax and taxes, are wondering what exactly is tax evasion, what is tax avoidance, what is the visionary of all times talking about. Well, do not worry, my amazing visionaries. I'm going to make sure that by the end of this episode, you are well informed about taxes, tax avoidance, tax evasion, and all other important things you need to know. First, you need to understand that when we say tax evasion, or tax evasion itself, is unlawful non-payment and underpayment of tax by individuals, companies, and other entities. So, when a person or a company evades taxes, they risk being in trouble with the tax authorities such as the BURS. Tax evasion, my dear friends, is against the law. When we hear tax evasion, we generally assume that an individual or a person or even a business or a company deliberately did it. However, tax evasion can also include any illegal non-payment of tax regardless of the entity's intentions. Every country at this current day in the world has a tax evasion problem. It is a global phenomenon. As for the taxpayers, tax evasion is unfair because the government has to make up for missing revenues by taxing more. So whenever you avoid paying tax, you create more problems for yourself as a taxpayer. Again, it is unfair because the evader uses what is called public goods in economics. The roads, the infrastructure, the services that are provided by the government, and those services are provided by the government with the money that other taxpayers paid without you contributing towards it. The reason why tax evasion is unfair is because the person who evades paying tax get to use the public goods, as they're called in economics. Public goods are things like roads, schools, hospitals, and even services that are provided by the government, infrastructure that is provided by the government, and it was provided by the government because the revenues that other taxpayers paid were used to build such goods. So when you, as a tax evader, do not pay tax, you get to cheat. It's like you are cheating because you are using resources that you did not contribute towards their construction. So at this current point, my amazing visionaries, you need to understand that global tax evasion is currently at 5% in estimation of the global economy. And this is a serious problem. Tax evasion, my dear friends, is also known as tax fraud. Usually, there's a contrast between tax avoidance and tax evasion. You need to understand that tax evasion, like I said earlier, is illegal. However, tax avoidance is legal. Tax avoidance, on the other hand, means finding all the loopholes or the legal loopholes. This is where you use what is known as the Income Tax Act or any other legislation that is provided by the government or that is provided by the legislature in your nation. For instance, in Botswana, we use what is known as Income Tax Act. So when you use the ICTA to find legal loopholes and then taking advantage of them in order to pay as little tax as possible, that is what we call tax avoidance. A good accountant can also help their clients to avoid tax. The difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion is that the former is legal, whereas the latter is not. So my dear friends, that is why people who gain or make money from criminal activities frequently engage in tax evasion, partly because they cannot report their true income. I believe in the past years, you have seen headlines about very famous people, public figures, religious leaders who have been charged with fraud or tax fraud, who've been accused of things like money laundering. Money laundering, most of the times, it's somewhat related to tax evasion. People who gain or make money through criminal activities or illegally usually do not report because they want to avoid the part of being questioned about their sources of income. So if you've ever asked yourself why every time you get to Standard Bank, FNB, or Stanbic Bank, the teller would ask you, where did you get the money from? Now you know. The whole idea is not to trouble you. The whole idea is not to undermine you. The whole idea is to understand where you got your income from, so that they know that the money was earned through legitimate means. So tax evaders usually avoid paying tax because they know they would be arrested if they reported their income or where it came from. That is why most of the people who are involved in these illegal activities of gaining money do not keep their money in the banks. Most of them always have cash, a lot of cash, or most of the time they keep their money in their homes instead of banking it or keeping it in the bank. Criminals who try to report their earnings as coming from lawful activities, or who try to portray as if their income is coming from lawful activities, they end up being caught and they risk being charged with money laundering. So my amazing friends, that is basically what tax avoidance is. It is legally arranging your tax affairs to ensure that only the minimum amount of tax is paid. It occurs within the light of law and it takes many forms. For example, some people who avoid tax, they hold some of their assets in their spouse's name. When people are married as a couple, they'll make sure that not everything is registered with the husband's name. Some things are registered with the wife's name. Some sell off assets before the end of the tax year. So for instance, the tax year in Botswana begins in June 30th and then it ends in September 30th the following year. So every time these people who avoid tax, they'll make sure that they pay off that income before 30th September, which is where tax returns are submitted. So another way in which most people avoid tax is by holding cash saving. They make sure that they hold cash instead of going to submit it, where it can be taxed to remove certain income from it. And then also some use tax reliefs such as the entrepreneur's relief or the business asset disposal relief, so that they can pay less capital gains tax. It's what is known as capital gains tax, which you will understand more about when you familiarize yourself with the Income Tax Act of Botswana. This is actually the tax that is mostly directed to the firms that deal with financial services. These are your banks, these are your consulting firms that mostly deal with the financial services. So having mentioned all these examples, what happens is that most people practice tax avoidance in so many different ways, in different situations. Some who decide to commit or do tax evasion are those who mostly do it intentionally. But tax avoidance, as most people do it consciously, most people consider it to be a sensible tax planning and even perfectly legal. Tax evasion or tax fraud can end up resulting in criminal act of paying less tax, as I said earlier, and it is legally due. So tax evasion examples include when you hide from the tax authorities any sources of income that you may be having, or even understating the amount of income that you make annually to the tax authorities. So this is when, for example, when someone who is earning a salary of 50,000 a year get to reduce or understate their income to 36,000 so that they can be taxed lower. Or when you do that as a taxpayer, you are doing what is known as tax evasion, because you are hiding information from the tax authorities that they can use to get the taxes that they're supposed to get from you, or the rate that is supposed to be the one that you're supposed to pay. Because as I mentioned in the previous episode, the tax or the taxable amounts and taxable categories that we have depend on the amount of income that you earn. If you, for instance, you earn something that is above 72,000 and you make sure that you hide from the tax authorities that you earn more than 72,000, but you reduce your annual income to be within the bracket of 0 to 72,000 pula, then you are doing what is known as tax evasion or tax fraud, and it is something that is very, very illegal. Now, my dear friends, the biggest question is, should you use tax avoidance since it is not illegal? Well, what I'm going to say is that some businesses, individuals, companies, and even entities have designed some tax avoidance schemes with which they use to avoid paying tax or to pay less tax. Now you need to get this clearly. There's what is known as general tax avoidance or the sensible tax planning, which I just mentioned earlier. Things like registering some of your properties in your spouse's name so that you avoid the tax burden you are required and obligated to pay. And then there's what is known now as the abusive artificial tax avoidance. The artificial tax avoidance is whereby you intentionally come up with schemes, as I just said, and they're designed in a way that they ensure that you are within the law. However, they're usually manipulating the law in a way that is not intended to be possible. What you need to understand is that even though tax avoidance is okay, it is a problem somehow. It is a problem in a sense that if you do not get to pay tax, then you are compromising the state of development in your nation, in the public goods that you use each and every day. The reason why some places do not have roads, the reason why some places do not have amenities and facilities that are considered to be very, very important for well-being of the people is because some people avoid paying tax. So you need to pay tax. Understand also that the reason why some people avoid paying tax is because they're not satisfied with the way in which tax is used. But that is a topic that I'm going to cover in the next episode, why some people avoid paying tax. It is because sometimes there is negligence that comes from the side of the government, which means that some funds that people paid with their hard-earned money as taxes get to be stolen. There's corruption that makes it hard for the developments that are people anticipated to be implemented, whereas they paid a lot of money, lots of the hard-earned money in form of taxes, hoping to see those developments. I believe that you've seen that in countries like Switzerland, taxes are used very well. They have great schools, they have great education system, they have great public goods, roads, infrastructure, you name it. That is why even though the tax or the rate of income tax in the Switzerland is very high, the people in that country are very satisfied and happy with it, simply because the kind of developments that they receive make them happy. This will bring us to the end of this amazing episode. But just like I said, remember that tax evasion is a crime, and there has been a lot of people all over the world who have had problems in their lives. Public figures, celebrities who have gone to prison simply because they avoided paying tax as they were supposed to. I'll give you an example. One of the United States of America celebrities by the name Jeru, he went to prison for 6 months between 2004 and 2008 when he forgot to file his tax returns. So you can see that in some countries, tax evasion is a very serious problem. I believe in South Africa, you've also seen the South African Revenue Department following people who do not pay tax or who do not submit that tax returns on time. For my amazing people, tax evasion is a serious crime, and make sure that you file your tax returns on time. The deadline for tax returns submission in Botswana is 30th September. So make sure that next month, before the 30th of September, you had submitted your tax returns. This is your friend, the visionary 4 times Miss Lesego Montsho. I love you and I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Do not forget to follow us on anchor.fm. Do not forget to follow our channel on YouTube. And most importantly, invite your friends to come and follow this Facebook page. I love you all. Peace.